Mark's eyes fluttered open, the weight of 1,000 years pressing down on his mind. He blinked, the world around him slowly coming into focus. Ruined buildings, cracked streets, and a sky devoid of color. Earth, his home planet, was nothing more than a lifeless husk. There was no sound except the distant echo of wind whistling through skeletal skyscrapers. He sat up, pushing himself against the cold concrete. His breath was shallow, his heart racing. Why was he here? That question burned in his mind, but no answers came. The world he had once known, bustling with life, had long since vanished. Where was everyone? The Jalar, an alien race that had arrived millennia ago, had wiped humanity out of existence. They had bent time itself, erasing the traces of humanity's history, its achievements, its very existence. There were no records, no artifacts, no memories of the human race left. Just the emptiness. They had made sure of that. But Mark was here, and he was alone. For the first time in what felt like eternity, he dared to stand. His legs wobbled, as if they were not used to carrying the weight of a world that no longer existed. He stumbled across the broken city, his footfalls echoing eerily through the deserted streets. Was he the last one? The last of humanity? Was he even human? His reflection in a shattered window offered no comfort. The man staring back at him was unfamiliar. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt, as though it had been years since he'd seen any semblance of life. But there was something else, something in his eyes, a flicker of something more than just survival. Was he meant to be here? That question refused to leave him. A cold gust of wind pushed past him, carrying with it a faint smell, metallic and sharp. The stench of decay. The sky, once blue and endless, now loomed a dull gray, as though it had never known the warmth of the sun. Yet something in the air stirred, something that made Mark pause. A feeling he couldn't shake. A feeling that his very presence here was wrong, as if time itself had been violated. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to exist. But as his fingers brushed against the cold stone of a building that had once been alive with activity, Mark felt the faintest spark of something. Hope? The Jalar had erased everything, even memories. History itself had been twisted, rewritten. Yet, somehow, there was a crack in the timeline, a fracture that had left him behind. He didn't know why he was spared. Perhaps it was a glitch, an accident, or maybe something else entirely. A shadow passed above him, casting a brief but oppressive darkness over the city. Mark looked up, squinting at the nothingness above. The Jalar were always watching, always lurking. They would come for him soon. He had to keep moving. Each step felt heavier, as if the world itself was pushing against him, trying to drag him back into the oblivion of forgotten time. But Mark kept walking, driven by an unshakable thought. If he was the last human, then he could change everything. Somehow, he would find a way to restore what had been lost. Somehow, he would prove that even the Jalar, mighty as they were, couldn't erase the human spirit. Mark's journey through the abandoned city was nothing short of surreal. Buildings, once proud and vibrant, now lay in ruins, hollowed out, crumbled, and forgotten. Yet as he walked, there was a strange sense of familiarity. It wasn't just the shape of the crumbling skyscrapers or the feel of the cracked pavement underfoot. It was deeper than that. At times, he swore he could hear whispers on the wind, soft, distant voices, echoes of a time long past. He paused in front of what used to be a park. The remnants of a fountain, dry and covered in dust, stood in the center. But it wasn't the lifeless stone that caught his attention. It was the metal plaque beside it. Torn and scratched by centuries of neglect, the inscription still read, "In memory of those who built the future." Mark's breath caught in his throat. That phrase, it seemed so familiar. Had he seen it before? He couldn't place it, but it tugged at something deep within him. He stepped closer, reaching out to touch the plaque, when a sudden jolt of memory flooded his mind. He saw a face, a woman's face, her eyes full of hope and determination. She was smiling, her hand resting on the shoulder of a child. His child? No, it wasn't his. The child was different, but somehow the memory felt personal. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Mark standing there, heart pounding. Was it real? He turned, trying to shake off the disorienting feeling. What was happening to him? His mind was fragmenting, and yet a part of him, a deep part of him, knew that these flashes weren't random. They were pieces of something larger, something that tied him to the world that had been lost. He had to understand it. With renewed determination, Mark continued his trek. It wasn't long before he found something that almost made him believe in miracles. A building that seemed intact. Unlike the others, this structure was not crumbled or abandoned. It was as if it had been preserved deliberately, shielded from the erosion of time. His pulse quickened as he moved closer, a gnawing sense of urgency creeping up his spine. The sign on the building read Institute for Temporal Studies, a name Mark didn't recognize, but something about it rang a bell. He pushed open the door, which creaked as if it hadn't been touched in centuries. Inside, everything appeared frozen in time. Dust-covered desks sat like forgotten relics, their chairs neatly aligned, as if waiting for someone to return. It was in the far corner of the room that Mark found it, a metallic device, hidden beneath a tarp. The moment his eyes fell on it, something inside him clicked. He knew what it was. It was a time-travel device, an old prototype, long forgotten. His fingers trembled as he approached it, pulling away the tarp. The machine was more intricate than anything he had seen in his fragmented memories. It looked like a hybrid of technology and something organic, as though the two had fused together into something beyond comprehension. The wires were coiled like snakes, pulsing with a faint light, as though it were waiting for someone to wake it from its slumber. Mark reached for the control panel. As his fingers brushed the cold metal, a surge of energy shot through him, jolting him backward. He grunted in pain, but the pain was nothing compared to the sudden flood of memories that followed. He saw flashes, vivid, clear glimpses of a past that didn't belong in this timeline. He saw a bustling city, vibrant and alive with human activity. People laughed, they ran, they loved. There were ships in the sky, real ships, not the mechanical monstrosities that filled the sky now. He saw humanity's final days, people fighting to hold on to their world, to preserve their place in history. And then the Jalar. He saw their ships descending like locusts, their cold, calculating eyes scanning the populace. And then, the worst of it, the moment humanity was erased. He gasped for air, his body shaking as the memories faded. The device had reconnected him to a time that no longer existed. The remnants of humanity, asterisk, his people, asterisk, were gone. The Jalar had wiped them from every timeline, every moment. But somehow, this machine had allowed him to see them again, to touch that lost reality. He had to understand how to use it. Desperation and hope filled his chest as he scanned the control panel. There was a flickering symbol, an icon that seemed to be calling him. It was a simple pattern, but it held the key to everything. He reached forward and pressed the button. Nothing happened. Silence. Mark sighed, but then click. The hum of the machine filled the room, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. Something was happening, but Mark didn't know what. He didn't know if it would work, if it was the right choice, but the feeling, the unshakable sensation that this device was humanity's final hope, was undeniable. His heart beat faster. This was his chance to undo the Jalar's work, to restore what had been taken from the world. But as the machine began to glow brighter, Mark realized something. He might not be the only one who had been watching. The hum of the machine echoed through the chamber, vibrating the air with a low, persistent thrum. Mark's heart raced as the device's lights flickered and pulsed. It felt like something ancient was waking up inside the machine, something that had been dormant for far too long. His hands trembled as he navigated the controls, heart in his throat. This was it, the moment he had been searching for. He was about to unlock the secrets to undoing the Jalar's destruction of humanity. But then the silence was broken. A harsh, alien voice echoed in his mind, cutting through his thoughts like a blade. You cannot undo what has been done, human. Mark staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. The voice came from within him, deep inside his consciousness. It wasn't a sound he could hear, but a force that resonated directly within his mind. "Who?" Mark whispered, panic creeping into his chest. "We are the Jalar, and you are already erased from existence." A ripple of dread ran down Mark's spine. The Jalar, the cold, calculating aliens who had wiped humanity from time itself. The ones who believed that time could be bent to their will, erasing anything they deemed unworthy. Mark was nothing more than a glitch in their perfect timeline, a threat to their control over reality. But he wasn't going to go down without a fight. He had survived this long. He could keep fighting. With a clenched fist, Mark slammed his palm against the device. The glow intensified, and suddenly, a shock wave of energy erupted from the machine. The force sent him crashing into the far wall, his body crumpling to the cold stone floor. His vision blurred, but through the haze, he saw the room twist and warp, the fabric of time itself warping around him like liquid. He gasped, struggling to rise. The air felt thick, oppressive, as though something was closing in on him from all sides. His body ached, but he pushed through the pain. He had to act fast. The Jalar were coming, and they wouldn't allow him to continue his mission. Through the chaos, Mark caught sight of something, a flicker in the air, a shimmer, like the edge of a door opening in space and time. He didn't hesitate. He lunged toward it, hoping it would lead him somewhere, anywhere, where he could escape the Jalar's relentless pursuit. The world shifted again, and Mark was plunged into an unfamiliar landscape. The sky above was streaked with purple and orange, the land around him jagged and barren. He could feel the weight of time pressing down on him, pushing him into this strange reality. He wasn't alone. As his eyes adjusted to the eerie new environment, he saw figures moving toward him, shadows in the distance, silent and unblinking. They wore dark robes, their faces obscured by hoods. Their presence felt ancient, almost timeless. The leader of the group stepped forward, lifting his hood to reveal a face that was more feeling than form. It was a being of energy, its features constantly shifting, like an unfinished sculpture. There was something profoundly alien about it, but its gaze held a weight, recognition. Mark's breath caught. "Who are you?" The being didn't answer with words. Instead, it projected an image into Mark's mind, a scene of a vast, forgotten city. People running, screaming, fighting to survive. And in the sky above, the cold ships of the Jalar descended, blotting out the sun. The image shifted, and Mark saw humanity's final stand. Their desperate fight to hold onto their history, to preserve the legacy they had built. But it was clear now, the fight was lost. Mark recoiled. This is a vision of the past." The being nodded, its form swirling in affirmation. The words it shared with Mark were not verbal, but visceral, a shared memory. The timeline is fractured. The Jalar's grasp over time is absolute. The one who remains, the last human, will be erased unless they can be stopped. Mark's heart thundered in his chest. The last human, that was him. He had been left behind in time, alone. But now, standing before these mysterious beings, he realized they were more than just observers. They were agents of something greater, something that could fight back against the Jalar. "They erased us all," Mark said, his voice raw. "How can I stop them?" The being's energy swirled ominously, and Mark's mind was flooded with a new image, a hidden facility, buried deep beneath the earth, guarded by time itself. There, at the heart of the Jalar's power, was a device that controlled the flow of time, an artifact of unimaginable power. If he could destroy it, the Jalar's control over history would shatter. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Jalar were everywhere, lurking in the shadows of every timeline, and their ability to manipulate reality itself meant that Mark would have to face a world constantly shifting around him, distorting and fracturing with every step. The being turned and pointed toward the horizon, where a shimmering portal was opening. "Go," it urged, its voice reverberating in his mind. "The future is still unwritten, but the Jalar will not let you reach it easily. You must act quickly." Mark's breath caught. This was it. This was his chance to rewrite history, to bring humanity back from the void where they had been lost. But the journey would not be simple. Time itself was against him, and the Jalar would stop at nothing to erase his very existence. As the portal beckoned, Mark stepped forward, knowing that every moment mattered. The fight was just beginning, and he was ready to wage war, not just for himself, but for humanity's future. The world around Mark warped and twisted as the portal consumed him. One moment, he was standing in a barren landscape, surrounded by ancient energy-shifting beings, and the next, he was falling through an endless corridor of light and darkness. The sensation was overwhelming, a violent pull, as if space and time itself were dragging him in every direction. He couldn't tell if moments passed or centuries as his body tumbled through dimensions. When the world finally settled, he found himself standing in a place that made his heart drop into his stomach. It was a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with glowing symbols that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy. But it wasn't just the unsettling atmosphere that made Mark freeze. It was the device. It stood at the center of the room, an enormous mechanical structure that hummed with raw power. The air around it shimmered, distorting as if reality itself was bending under its influence. This was it, the heart of the Jalar's control over time, the artifact that kept them in charge of history. Mark knew it instinctively, as though it had been etched into his very DNA. He stepped forward, his breath shallow, mind racing. Destroying it wouldn't be easy. The Jalar had gone to great lengths to protect this device. Mark could sense that their influence was everywhere, like a shadow watching, waiting for him to make the wrong move. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint but undeniable. "You are too late." The voice came from the walls, the ceiling, the very air around him. It was as if the chamber itself was alive and aware. Mark spun around, his pulse quickening. "You think you can rewrite time? You cannot." The voice became louder, colder. "The Jalar control all timelines. Humanity is a mistake, a fleeting anomaly that must be eradicated." Mark clenched his fists, defiance surging within him. "I'll make you regret ever trying to erase us." At that moment, the walls of the chamber began to pulse with an intense, reddish glow. The air grew thick with energy, and Mark felt a sudden pressure building around him, as though the very fabric of the world was trying to crush him. And then they appeared. The Jalar. There were no ships, no grand armies descending from the sky. Instead, they materialized out of thin air, their forms like shadowy wraiths, tall, angular, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the very core of his being. Their skin was dark as space, shifting constantly, as if they were not truly of this world. The leader of the Jalar stepped forward, its presence overwhelming. Its voice reverberated through Mark's mind, chilling him to the bone. "You cannot stop what has already been done. The timeline has been perfected. Humanity was an error, and you will be erased just like the rest." Mark stood his ground, his heart pounding. He had no weapons, no allies, only his resolve. But that was enough. It had to be. "You're wrong," he said, his voice steady despite the dread curling in his stomach. "History isn't yours to control. You may have erased us from time, but you can't erase what's in my heart, what's in every human heart." The Jalar leader tilted its head, as if studying him with an alien curiosity. "You cling to memories that do not belong. You fight a war already lost." The room around them seemed to breathe, and the very walls seemed to pulse in response to the tension between them. Mark could feel the weight of the Jalar's power pressing in on him, threatening to crush him with every passing second. But then something shifted. The device at the center of the room hummed louder, its glow intensifying as Mark's own will clashed against it. He wasn't alone anymore. The memories of humanity, of his people, their greatness and their fall, coursed through his mind. They were with him now, their voices urging him forward. Suddenly Mark understood. The Jalar hadn't just erased humanity's history from a timeline. They had erased the collective will of humanity to exist, the power of memory, of purpose, of striving for something better. That was what the Jalar feared most. Humanity's will, Mark thought, is the key to undoing this. With a surge of adrenaline, Mark moved toward the device. As he reached it, The Jalar leader's voice boomed in his mind once more. You are too weak. You cannot stand against the flow of time. The multiverse itself is at your feet, and you are nothing. But Mark didn't listen. The device pulsed in time with his heartbeat, a rhythm he could feel in every fiber of his being. He placed his hands on it, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. Humanity was never a mistake, he whispered, his voice filled with the weight of every human who had ever lived. It was a force of nature. In that moment, the device flared to life, its energy shooting out in every direction. The walls of the chamber cracked as time itself began to unravel. The Jalar leader screamed, but it was too late. Mark's will, the will of the last human, was unstoppable. As the power of the device surged through him, Mark felt a strange connection, a bond to every human who had ever lived. He wasn't just one man anymore. He was humanity itself, the sum of all its triumphs, its mistakes, its love, and its loss. The Jalar's time was over. Humanity's time was coming back. The world around Mark exploded into light. The force of the device surged through him, blasting the chamber apart. Reality itself twisted and tore as the walls buckled under the overwhelming power. The air crackled with the weight of the unleashed energy, and for a moment, Mark was consumed by it. His body felt weightless, as if he were floating in the very core of the universe, surrounded by the echoes of every timeline, every moment that had ever existed. But amidst the chaos, there was clarity. The device, the artifact of the Jalar's power, had connected with him in ways he couldn't explain. It was no longer just a tool to bend time. It was an extension of his will, an embodiment of humanity's defiance against erasure. Mark closed his eyes and focused, summoning every ounce of strength. He could feel the Jalar leader's presence trying to crush him, to impose its control over him. But it was fading. The force of his memories, the collective human will, was overwhelming it. The leader's voice echoed in his mind, desperate, frenzied. You cannot erase us all. We are eternal. You will fall, and so will your people. But Mark didn't waver. He had already felt humanity's heartbeat. It was in his chest, in his bones, in his soul. Humanity wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something that could be erased. It was a force that couldn't be stopped, a flame that would burn through time, even if they tried to extinguish it. With a final push of his will, Mark activated the core of the device. The light exploded outward, engulfing the entire chamber in a burst of radiant energy. For a moment, everything was nothing, a brilliant, blinding white that filled the universe. And then silence. When Mark opened his eyes, the world had changed. The chamber he had been standing in was gone. The Jalar's presence had vanished. Time, it seemed, had rewound, reweaving itself back into its natural course. There was no trace of the Jalar's manipulations, no sign of their cruel reign over history. It was as if they had never existed at all. Mark stood alone in an open field, the air fresh and crisp around him. The sky above was clear, unmarred by the scars of alien ships. He could hear birds singing in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the wind, sounds he hadn't heard in so long, a reminder of what humanity had once protected. It was a new beginning, but it wasn't just the world that had changed. Mark could feel the shift within himself. He wasn't alone anymore. The memories of every human who had ever lived, those who fought, loved, and dreamed, were with him. He could feel them in the depths of his mind, their hopes and fears, their victories and failures. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. He wasn't just one man. He was humanity, living and breathing. He looked around, taking in the beauty of the world that now stretched out before him. He could see distant cities, untouched by the ravages of war. Human civilization was rebuilding itself, and he would be there, guiding it forward. The past might have been lost, but the future was still his to shape. A soft, familiar voice filled his mind, the energy beings, the ones who had helped him along the way. The timeline is whole again, they whispered. But it is now your responsibility. You are the bridge between what was and what will be. Do not forget, this world will always need its human heart. Mark smiled, nodding. He understood. The fight hadn't been just to bring humanity back. It was to ensure that its spirit, its will to thrive, would never again be erased. The Jalar had underestimated that. They had underestimated the power of humanity's desire to exist. And now, Mark stood at the precipice of a new age, knowing that it was up to him to protect it. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs. The weight of the responsibility was heavy, but it was a weight he would bear proudly. Humanity had always been defined by its resilience, its ability to overcome the impossible. The Jalar may have tried to erase them from time, but they had only made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten one simple truth. Humanity would never be forgotten. Mark turned and began walking toward the distant horizon. The sun was rising, casting golden light over the world. It was a new dawn, a new beginning for the last human, and for all of humanity, reborn from the ashes of time. And this time, they would write their own history. The end.